So good afternoon, everyone. So once again, meaning in Mitzvot. Although I said that the Parshiot in Sefer Bereshit are very much lacking in mitzvahs, Parsha just gone, Vayishlach actually does have a mitzvah in it. There's a negative prohibition. It's number 3 in the Torah, that of Gid Hanasher, the prohibition of eating the sinew of the sciatic nerve, made famous by the incident of Yaakov's struggle with the angel, then gets struck on the thigh. So let's have a look at it. It's a fascinating mitzvah, and the context of it is also very, very interesting. So we read last Shabbos in Parshas Vayishlach in Bereshit chapter 32, verse 33, that Yaakov, having struggled with the angel seeing he cannot be successful against Yaakov, strikes him on the thigh and injures him on the thigh. Says the Torah, Al Kain, and therefore, Lo yochlu b'nei Yisrael es gidan asher shel kav hayarech ad hayom hazeh. Until this day, the children of Israel cannot eat the gidan asher, the sciatic nerve or the tendon, displaced tendon, which is on the socket of the hip until this day. Ki naga b'kaf yerech Yaakov b'gidan asher, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the hip sinew. The first thing to notice about this is, with the other mitzvahs in Bereshit before Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah, the question is this merely a narrative telling us that this is what happened to Yaakov? How can it have the force of a mitzvah, and here a negative prohibition, something we're not allowed to do, if it merely took place before the giving of the Torah and is just part of something that happened to Yaakov? So how can it have enduring effect? So says the Sefer Chinuch straight away, and this phrase, they shall not eat, is not to be taken as part of the story, to mean that because this event happened to our forefather, we, his descendants, refrain from eating that nerve. Rather, it is a warning, a prohibition of God that they shall not eat it. So although it looks like, when it says here, Al Kain lo yochlu b'nei Yisrael, although this might look like it's part of the narrative, Yaakov got struck on the hip, and therefore we don't eat the hip nowadays. You might think, well, it's just part of the story. No, it actually is Hashem implanting into the narrative the mitzvah, the negative prohibition of eating the Gidan Asher, the sciatic nerve. And we'll come back to that idea more, because the Sefer Chinuch very much bases themselves on a Rambam, which we'll see in the next source. But while we're looking at the Sefer Chinuch, let's see how the Sefer Chinuch explains the basis of this. What is the meaning behind this mitzvah? And he says the following: it's from the root of this mitzvah, that is to serve as a hint to Israel, that though they will suffer many troubles in exile by the hands of the nations and by the hands of the descendants of Esav, i.e. the Christians, the Jews should trust they will not perish, but rather their descendants and name will stand firm forever, and their Redeemer will come and redeem them from their oppressor. And in continually remembering this idea through the commandment that serves as a reminder, they will stand firm in their faith and righteousness forever. And this hint stems from the fact that the angel who fought Yaakov, our forefather, who, according to tradition, based on the Midrash, was the guardian angel of Esav, wished to eliminate Yaakov from the world, he and his descendants, but he could not get the better of him, but anguished him in injuring his thigh. Likewise, Esav's seed anguishes the seed of Yaakov, but in the end, the latter will be saved from them, as we find in the verse with respect to our forefather, the sun shone to heal him, and he was saved from the pain. So will the Son of the Messiah shine, and he will heal us from our pain and redeem us speedily in our days. Amen. So what is the Sefer Chinuch telling us? Why is it that we still to this day don't eat the part of the animal that contains the sciatic nerve, although technically I know it can be portioned and removed. It's very complex and costly to do so, but nevertheless that part still remains forbidden to us. It says Sefer Chinuch, it serves as a reminder that we should remain faithful, that even though we will, and Yaakov knew that we would face oppression and those who sought to destroy us in the future, we should know that just as Yaakov prevailed, so too we will prevail. And by not eating the Gidan Asher, that acts as a constant reminder to us that this is the injured part of our forefather Yaakov, who known as Israel, who strove with the angel and with man and prevailed. That is the eternal symbol to us that we will continue to survive, and that's why we don't eat the Gid HaNasher. Okay, now I mentioned that Sefer HaChinuch in his first paragraph said that you shouldn't think that this was put in here as part of a narrative and doesn't have the force of a mitzvah prohibition. The Rambam, in his commentary on the Mishnah in Achulin, says something very interesting. So there's no English translation, my friends, I have to translate it. He says, consider carefully this important principle that is contained in this Mishnah. You should know, he says, that whatever we do, whatever mitzvahs we do to this day, or refrain, any prohibitions we refrain from, they are on account of Hashem having commanded us through Moshe Rabbeinu. Not that Hashem tells the prophets before him. For example, as we were told that we mustn't eat the limb from a living animal. That was the Bnei Noach after the flood. That was the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach. The 7 mitzvahs that were given to the descendants of Noah. One of them being not to eat the limb from a living animal. The reason why we don't eat it is not because the Hashem prohibited Noach to do it. But only because Moshe Rabbeinu prohibited it at Sinai, that establishes the prohibition. So although there may have been a prohibition pre-Sinai, that doesn't obligate us in order to observe it. But don't think therefore we're not obligated to observe it. No, those prohibitions were reiterated at Sinai and therefore they remain in force now. He says, for example, we still circumcise to this day. Again, simply we don't perform bris milah just because Abraham and his descendants did it, although it connects us to Abraham Avinu. No, it's Shakadosh Baruch Hu Tziva Osanu Alei Moshe Rabbeinu, but only because Hashem commanded us through Moshe that we should do it. Shnimol, that we should circumcise them. Come on, it says Shema Abraham Avinu Elav Shalom. V'chein, and then this is a bit about what's relevant to us. V'chein, the Gid HaNasher. Similarly, when it comes to the Gid HaNasher, not eating the sciatic nerve, we don't just follow on after the prohibition that was set out for Yaakov, mitzvahs Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom. Rather, it's on account of Moshe Rabbeinu commanding us to do so. That when Moshe gave all the mitzvahs at Har Sinai, or 613 of them, this mitzvah, this prohibition of eating the Gid HaNasher was included in it. There's no avoiding it. You can't say that was historical, that was during the times of Yaakov, it doesn't apply anymore. No, all of these mitzvahs apply because they were made at Sinai. Okay, so that tells us that the mitzvah so we know now the prohibition of Gid HaNasher remains to this day. Let's try and understand really what is the meaning behind this mitzvah. What is it trying to teach us? So I've got a number of different sources. Some of them say fairly similar things, but some say interestingly different things. So firstly, one of the commentators known as the Sforno, he said, the Torah says, Al Kain lo yochlu b'nei Yisrael. We saw in our verse, therefore, the Jewish people, the b'nei Yisrael, do not eat the Gid HaNasher, which is on the joint of the hip to this day. This is the Sforno. Why so? In order to ensure that the damage inflicted to Yaakov's offspring, as predicted by the angel, should be kept to a minimum, as long as they remind themselves of the symbolic meaning of that injury suffered by Yaakov during his nocturnal encounter with the angel. The first thing you're saying is actually maintaining the prohibition, avoiding eating the Gid HaNasher to this day, is a way of minimizing the impact or the promise or the thing that was foreseen by the angel at that time. So as we saw in the Sefer HaChinuch, the angels slap him on the thigh as a symbol that you will be oppressed, and there will be those who will try to destroy you. You may get injured by it. You may, in some way, be damaged by it. As we've seen through history, the Jewish people have suffered greatly at the hands of our enemies. However, ultimately, you will survive. Says this morning something fascinating. We observe the mitzvah of Gid HaNasheh in order, in some way, to minimize the impact of that damage. Fascinating. That's the first thing he says. Alternatively, the moral lesson is that just as the Gid HaNasheh is totally devoid of taste, does not appeal to the palate, the consuming it would not provide the sinner with any kind of gratification, we are taught not to second guess God's legislation by treating this commandment as not important. That's fascinating. I think if we see the Hebrew actually, we'd see the word taste here. The word in Hebrew, ta'am, means taste and also reason. For something to have that we call that the ta'amei ha-mitzvot, the reasons behind the mitzvot, the meaning of the mitzvot. I think it's a play on words he's saying is that although the Gid HaNasheh, the sciatic nerve, actually has no taste whatsoever, and therefore a person who eats it going against the prohibition benefits in no way from it because there's no enjoyment to it. But the deep meaning, yeah.
How does porging come into it?
So that's a method by which one is still able to eat the meat that surrounds the sciatic nerve without actually eating the sciatic nerve itself. It removes the sciatic nerve and leaving the meat behind.
Because that's not often done in this country now.
No, it's not. It's because it's very skilled, it's very costly, and it's not particularly it's not particularly cost effective.
When you say it's costly, it's because of time that the shochet has to spend.
Yes, yeah, and probably also the amount of wastage as well. He has to make sure that he removes none of the nerve, only the fat surrounding it is left.
Because I think during the Second World War, it was permitted, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it is done in some countries. Though. In Israel, they still do it.
In France,
in Argentina, they do it. There are places where they still do it. You can get a rump steak in certain parts of the Jewish world, but not here.
Is there Sforno saying that this is a chok then?
Oh, that's a very good point, Martin. Yeah, thank you. I think he's not going so far as saying that, but he's saying it's close to it. That we shouldn't think, even though there's no ta'am, even though there's no taste to it, meaning I can't discern a real reason for it. Why? How does not eating something help me achieve something else? It says, well, you shouldn't. Basically, what it's saying is to learn that you shouldn't second guess God. There is a reason for it. There is a taste for it. We may not be able to understand what it is, but know that it is important. And that the lesson for all the mitzvot, those which are, as Martin quite rightly said, chukim, those which don't seem to have any discernible reason, particularly don't have for us, and also mishpatim, those that do, that we cannot attach our own reasons behind them, and more importantly, we shouldn't make it our observance of them dependent on, well, I understand this makes great sense. Yeah, I understand why I should do that, therefore I'll do it. But I don't understand why I should do this, therefore I'm not going to do it. I mean, there'd be lots of mitzvahs we wouldn't do if we only didn't if we understood the reason. Yeah. So that's a good point I think that Sforno is making. Okay. The next commentary is the Chizkuni, contemporary to Sforno, I think. It also says, therefore it's appropriate the Israelites do not eat the Gid HaNasheh. It says this construction is parallel to the verse that says in Isaiah, V'halov kol kain, these were her, lo kain al kain. It does not seem like this to him. In other words, it would be right and proper to punish the Israelites not to eat that particular sinew, as they should not have allowed their founding father to expose to hostile forces at night. Yaakov's sons were physically strong, and they should have been at hand to assist their father if the need arose. Seeing that they failed to do this, the blame for the injury sustained by their father was theirs. From now on, they would have learned their lesson and would practice the commandment to accompany their father, or for that matter, any older or wiser person, especially at night. Yaakov himself set an example when he accompanied his son Yosef part of the way on his mission that he had sent him on, and which was potentially dangerous. So fascinating. So if you look at the narrative closely, how did Yaakov end up struggling with the angel at night? It says he went back across the river to retrieve some pachim katanim, some small jugs. Well, you tell Yaakov Levadoi that Yaakov was left alone at night, and then the angel of the Sarshel Esav attacked him. because he was alone at night, and there are many different sources that talk about the dangerous forces that there are at night. In fact, in the Maariv, we actually add in an additional paragraph, according to some opinions, to the Maariv tefillahs, in order that people who used to live at the extremities, used to walk out of the town populated areas, shouldn't be unaccompanied. That people should be walking with other people. There are different forces around at night, and therefore a person should avoid. The mission in Pirkei Avos also says a person shouldn't walk around at night alone. So on account of the fact that Yaakov's children were some way responsible for him having been attacked, we were not allowed to eat the Gilon Asher, to serve as a constant reminder that we, the Jewish people, must look after each other. That we do face these difficult and dangerous forces, night being synonymous with oppression and persecution. And the only way we're going to survive is if we look after each other. And that's a very powerful message from this mitzvah. That's the first thing Chris Cooley says.
Sorry, can I just ask a question now?
Of course.
Surely his sons were too young at that stage. And the other thing I was going to say is there are commentaries which say that it didn't actually happen, the physical fight. It was more something in a dream.
Yeah. So I think the first one, he was saying there were sons who were old enough. I remember there's quite a spread of age between them.
I can't remember. I thought even Reuven was quite young. Does it say somewhere Reuven was only 11 or something like that?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. You may be right. You'd be right, but he's making the point that they were strong enough they could have helped him.
If they'd been old enough. Yeah.
I know he's not talking about the age, he's talking about the strength.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not long till, this week's parsha we read how they were able to, how they plotted against their brother Yosef.
Yeah.
Yeah. They took him and they threw him in a pit. So there was enough strength when they wanted it to be, let's say. That's your second point. Well, the second point, there's maybe an allegorical narrative. Yeah, that's not difficult to say that necessarily. But nevertheless, the point remains, which is it serves as you could say it's like a psychosomatic pain. There's a transferred pain to this part of the body, but the message remains the same, which is if we are going to survive persecution and the dark forces of night, we need to look after each other. And this mitzvah reminds us of that. That's the first thing he says. I'm just conscious of how long we've got left. Let's carry on. A different approach to our verses as a result of their father Yaakov having stood up to the protective celestial force of Esav. His sons stopped eating this part of the body that the angel had been able to injure. They did this out of a feeling of pride in their founding father. That's fascinating. So again, an idea that you tried to kill us, you tried to attack us, we survived. To remember that we're not going to eat this part of the body that you were able to damage. It's a fascinating point. And the third approach, he says, due to their father Yaakov having sustained an injury, his descendants voluntarily decided not to eat that part of the body of an animal that had been injured in their father's body. This has to be understood by the use of a parable. A person suffered from a headache or from pains in a different part of his body. As a reminder of that pain, he decides not to eat that part of the body of an animal as a symbol of his having been healed from that pain. So that if abstention would serve as a remedy from them, protective medicine in the future. Interesting idea. So some sort of idea, again, a reminder, like a way of being grateful for having been cured of a previous impediment or pain, to avoid that thing which was that caused the pain in the first place. That's an interesting idea. So we've got three ideas there in the Chizkuni. I want to move on. So the couple of those, what we've seen in the Sforno and this Chizkuni seem to be slightly negative connotations as to why we observe this mitzvah. But Choshor puts a more positive spin on it. He says it is to be a commemoration for them that their forefather fought with the angel and the latter could not subdue him. And so the angel pressed him on the hollow of his thigh in the place where there is the sciatic nerve. And this here. It is a commemoration of glory and greatness. So we avoid eating the sciatic nerve to remember that Yaakov was victorious over this angel, that all he could do was press him on the hollow of his thigh and give him a slight limp. So there's a very positive spin there on why we observe the mitzvah. Moving on. Oh, this is a fascinating idea. The Hamek Dava, which is the Siv, Veloshiv, he says, Begilan Asher. Why particularly this sinew, this sciatic nerve we shouldn't eat? Again, so there's no English translation. He says, Shlo Yehei Adam Kasher Kegid. It serves as a reminder that a person shouldn't be hard like a sinew, like a tendon. It shouldn't be like fixed and strong. Because the I of Maseches, the Amin of Maseches Tanis is brought down Perek Gimel, brought down the 3rd chapter of the Gemara in Tanis. Le'olam yehi adam rach b'kanan. A person should always be soft like a reed, like a reed in the sea, which bends in the wind, right? That's soft and malleable and pliable. V'lo yehi kasher ke'erez, and shouldn't be hard like a cedar tree. Yeah, that's very fixed and firm and unmoving. A person should have some sort of flexibility to them, some willingness to move and change. And therefore, we avoid the Gilan Asher, which is a sinew which is very hard and taut. It's an interesting idea, completely different to what we've seen up to now. A couple more items I want to share with you. Says the Kli Yakar. We find in the statements of our rabbis, may they be blessed, the deep things, the comprehension of which are difficult, are compared to tendons. As Rashi explained in Parshas Yisro, and tell the children of Israel, he explained, tell to the males matters as difficult as tendons. And comprehension is called eating, as we find that about the 4 that enter the orchard, it cites the verse. That means the orchard means the pardes is an acronym for the 4 different ways of explaining the Torah. According to Pshat, the simple explanation, Remez, the allegorical, Drash, and so different methods of explaining the Torah. It cites the verse, eat your fill of honey, about investigation that is hidden from the eye of all living. And this commandment is a hint for the future generations, prevent Israel from hidden mystical investigations. As Ben Sirus said, you have no business in hidden things. This is fascinating. So 2 things. So this idea of a tendon is symbolic of something which is hard, difficult to comprehend. Eating is, what does he say? Eating is synonymous with comprehension. So we don't eat something which is hard. Yeah, we don't eat the sciatic nerve. The sciatic nerve is hard, and eating is in terms of comprehension, meaning we have to accept sometimes there are things that we cannot comprehend. And again, the very next we saw, as Martin mentioned, this is a chok. As we saw, I think it was in the Sefer Achila, that, was it here or no? The Sforno, about second guessing God. Where was that? Of course. Yeah, here in Sforno, we're taught that we should not try to second guess God's legislation by treating this mitzvah as not important. So there's sometimes, as we've seen, there are mitzvahs that we've seen previously that are beyond our comprehension, and we have to accept that is the case. That is what's symbolic of. There are things that happen to us. And I think this was saying on a national level or both on a personal level, that the struggle that Yaakov had with this angel is symbolic of the struggles that we have on a national and both a personal level. There are times in our lives we face difficulties that we can't understand. And we have to accept that there are things that are beyond our comprehension. There are things that happen that we aren't able to understand. And that is symbolized by this mitzvah of avoiding eating this hard, difficult tendon. It goes on and says, for one should be concerned about this, lest their mind be destroyed and they come to heresy. Again, this is reference to this idea of one of the people who entered into this orchard and when they had certain mystical ideas revealed to them, could not handle it. It was far too difficult for them to be understand. It's like, if someone was to explain to somebody and who has no knowledge of, I don't know, let's say physics, yeah? And they're trying to explain it to you, and you just don't know what they're talking about. You know the expression, your head will explode, right? It's just too difficult to comprehend. You know, there are things which are just too hard for us to understand. And that is what is meant, that's what it's trying to say here. We'll just carry on a little bit further. There's a couple more ideas I want to share with you. Says the Malbim, again, sorry, there's only English translation. Let me just remind us what he says here. So the Malbim says something interesting. Again, why is it, if all these wonderful ideas are associated with this Gidan Asher, what is it about not eating it that's so important? Why actually don't we eat it to remind us? You know, we have certain foods that we eat to remind us of certain things. We eat matzah to remind us of the exodus from Egypt. Yeah, we eat this. All of our festivals are connected with food. So if we want to remind ourselves of something, if we want this Gidan Asher to be symbolic of something, why not eat it to remind us? And therefore we can say, while I'm eating it, I'm remembering that there are certain things which are difficult. There are certain ideas I don't understand. And that's why I'm eating this, to remind me of that. Says the Malbim, I'll just summarize really quickly. He says that we know that the food you eat, was a phrase, you are what you eat. We know that the food that we eat becomes part of the person who eats it. And when you eat, that's why we're told to avoid eating certain things. He says, certain things which are impure and abominable. The Torah says, don't eat them. Why? Because they have a physical and a spiritual impact on us. So here also, we're told to avoid the Gidan Asher because of what it represents. That we shouldn't eat it because we don't want it to become part of us. He says here the last line, therefore we are forbidden to eat the Gidan Asher as a reminder. That we should separate ourselves from those things which we desire, those things unnecessary, things that we have a time for, we have an inclination towards, and we should practice becoming holy people to God. And we do that, as we see in the Ramban, by Purushim Minha, I think, by avoiding those things which are forbidden to us. How do we become holy? By stopping ourselves eating things which we are told we shouldn't eat. And therefore, that's why we're told not to eat the Gidan Asher, in order to remember that, rather than eat it. And then finally, I want to share with you the Shalach. He says the following. The following is the way the Zohar and other Kabbalistic books explain the mystical dimension of the prohibition of this commandment. It says man's various limbs are perceived as branches of the Merkavah in the higher regions, meaning the divine chariot, so a connection to God. The Torah has given us 248 positive commandments, which correspond to each of the 248 limbs of Adam Elyon, man's counterpart in the spiritual regions. Kabbalists speak of 248 angels bearing the name of their master. These angels are perceived as clothing of the Shekhinah, so they somehow enclose the divine presence. There are also 365 branches of din, justice, on the tree in the upper regions, corresponding to 365 days of the year and the 365 sinews of man. There is both a sinew and a negative commandment for every day of the year. And the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, is the day which corresponds to the prohibition of Gidan Asher. It's fascinating. The idea of Tisha B'Av, the day on which we mourn the destruction of the temple, the first one by the Babylonians, the second one by the Romans. What do we say right at the beginning? That Esav represents, he's the progenitor of the Romans, Esav Christians. Yeah, that comes from the Romans, right? Tisha B'Av is the day in which we remember the destruction of the temple by the Romans. The temple has not yet been, the second temple was not yet rebuilt. Our sages saw an allusion in the extra word es in Al Kain Lo Yachlu B'nei Yisrael Es Gidan Asher to include Tisha B'Av, a day when any food intake is prohibited anyway. They also introduced Samal v'Yitzhara, Satan and evil at urge. Both the eating of that sinew and profiting from it in some other manner is prohibited. Neither Israel nor any of its limbs could be defeated on any other calendar date, nor could any other sinew have succumbed to its adversary except the Gidan Asher. Only on that date was the power of din, justice, strong enough to undermine the strength of Israel. On that date, God abandoned us in exile until a spirit will blow from the heavens. Anyone who eats on the 9th of Av is considered as if he's eaten the Gid Hanasher. Wow, that's really powerful. So what are you saying? The Gid Hanasher represents that sinew, which is the sinew that God allows the power to attack us, which we saw originally with Yaakov, and continues all the way through until the 9th of Av. We're not allowed to eat it. The Torah is telling us, do not eat it, and it's telling us in connection today where we can't eat anyway, to show to us that there's something more than just physically eating it. There's something about what it represents as this idea of the power of din overcoming God's mercy towards us, therefore allowing our enemies to attack us. Therefore, avoiding the Gid Hanasher, is in some way acknowledging that the again, as we saw previously, the route to our physical protection, spiritual protection, is staying true to the mitzvahs that God gives us, because those bind us not only to God but also to other people, as we saw. That's a requirement in order for us to be protected and remain safe. Okay, we have to leave it there. I just thought it's fascinating to see a number of different ways of looking at this mitzvah, number of layers of meaning in this mitzvah, why it is we don't eat the Gid Hanasher.